Well, good afternoon. I'm Kris Cooper, Fire Marshal, Colorado Springs Fire Department.
Fantastic. And Becca, would you like to go next?
My mute button got lost off the screen. I'm here. I'm Becca Samulski. I'm the Director of Fire Adapted Colorado. I'm sure that's only the second tech glitch we'll have today.
Yeah. We'll get through it pretty quick. Let's see. Next, Jake Neese, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Jake Neese. I'm a county commissioner in Ouray County.
Fantastic. Thank you. And Kim, would you like to?
Jay Nelson.
Good afternoon, Jay Nelson, Chief Executive Officer for Red, White, and Blue Fire, and currently the interim fire marshal for Summit County, which includes Red, White, and Blue Fire and Summit Fire and EMS.
Nice. Thank you, sir. Phillip.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Phillip Sweat. I am the deputy building official here in Breckenridge, Colorado.
And I don't see Paul. Are you online?
Paul's going to be joining us here in just a little bit. He just shot me a note, so we'll let him do his introduction when he gets in.
Yeah, so just for everybody, we'll also have Paul Cada from Vail Fire joining us as another commentator. So go ahead if you want to.
Yeah, so we're going to keep our video off for a moment while we work on that on our side here so that everyone's not having to look at us flicker in and out. And we really do appreciate everyone joining us here today. So for those who have not had a chance to meet us, my name's Aaron Johnson. This is Kim McDonald. We are the Wildland Urban Interface Professional Development Educators, working with the DFPC, the Division of Fire Prevention and Control. And our primary work right now is focused around the Wildfire Resiliency Code. And so we're assisting with the adoption, making sure that jurisdictions have a clear path forward for how they're going to incorporate it into their current system, helping with developing programs to educate on the enforcement components and just making sure that we're getting as much support out there as possible to make the adoption as smooth as possible. Kim?
Yeah, so just for everybody's knowledge, this is a fairly new position within DFPC. Aaron and I just started the first part of the year, so we've been pretty busy traveling the state, talking to jurisdictions, and just educating them on this code. It's a good code, first code out. So code board itself did a great job. When you take 24 individuals and give them basically 18 months to get a code adopted, I thought they did a wonderful job. Also, just listening in today is Terry Larson, who is the administrator for the code board. So in the future, if anybody has any questions, on the website there is an email there, and we encourage everybody to, if they have questions, please let us know, and how can we help you? So.
Yeah, and as we let our speakers talk today, one of the things we want to point out is that even though the state model code is fairly new, wildfire mitigation in general is not. It's been going on for a long time, and we have communities that have adopted codes previously that actually helped inform the codes that we took on at the state level, as well as programs that have been in existence that do a great job for building up communities, educating, and supporting that work outside of the code. And so we're really excited for our speakers to be able to join us and share a little bit of information about the mitigation journey that their communities have gone through, and share a little bit about how they have worked with bringing the code into the work that they've already been doing and how they've been able to build upon that. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Kris Cooper with Colorado Springs Fire and let him share his story.
All right, thank you. I'm going to share my screen and see if I can get the presentation going. Hopefully you can all see that as I'm sharing it. I'm happy to be part of this presentation today and honored that I'm with an organization that has been doing wildfire mitigation for quite some time. One of the things that I want to start off with is, when you think about wildfire mitigation, where do you start, right? And there's a lot of things that go into that. And on the screen, you should see, several bullets, and I'm not going to hit on those in great detail, but I want to hit on some highlights there. Our program started back in the late 90s, well, actually early 90s, when we hired a fire chief from Oakland, California. And when he arrived, he looked around and said, "We've got a problem in Colorado Springs. What we're seeing here looks a lot like what they experienced in California." And so his vision really set the stage of where we need to go. Over the years, we've learned a lot of lessons, a lot of lessons the hard way as well. And so stakeholder involvement is certainly critical in the process as you begin to think about implementing wildfire mitigation in your community. Partner and agency collaborations, that your building department, your planning and zoning department, other work groups. We need to figure out what that dance looks like and who's responsible for what. Something else we learned along the way is consistent messaging is really critical, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. And obviously, resiliency and stamina. We always say that wildfire mitigation is not a sprint. We've been doing our program for many years, and we continue to learn, we continue to adapt and change as we need to ensure that our community is protected appropriately. See if I can get my next screen here. My slides aren't changing. There we go. So when we started, a little bit of our history, like I said, we started a public education campaign in the early 90s, and then we jumped on a planning and zoning ordinance in 93 that was intended to limit disturbance of the hillside for the sake of soil stabilization. And so obviously when we talk about fuels management and soil stabilization, there could be some conflicts there, and there's a lot of things we had to work through to ultimately come up with a common ground. We implemented our neighborhood chipping program in 2002, and then roofing ordinance in 2003 after the Hayman fire, which banned wood shake roofs and required Class A roofs on all residential properties moving forward. We wrote our first WUI code in 2013 on the heels of the Waldo Canyon fire. And that was a realization that we could not continue to allow our community to build as they had before that fire. We'd learned a lot of things along the way, but that was certainly a turning point for us to take advantage of. Fire service never let a good disaster go to waste, right? And so we jumped on that and wrote our own code at that time. We made some changes to that code in 2021. In 2022, we're fortunate to be able to get a $20 million gift from Initiative 2D, which was Tabor money revenues that we're allowed to keep. And we are able to use 5% of that fund each year for our wildfire mitigation projects. And then obviously we're at the point of the Colorado Wild Resiliency Code, and we just passed that. Well, we're in the process of passing that through our city council. So some of the programs we offer along the way, we do HOA meetings with about 143 HOAs that we're active with. We do annual Living with Wildfire Town Hall series where we do about 6 or 7 meetings during the summer months, talk about wildfire. We do on-site consultations to work with homeowners to advise them what they can do to make their property safer. And we do have some projects stipend monies to the tune of about $50,000 a year, where we'll do a dollar for dollar match for homeowners up to $500 as they commit to doing mitigation work on their property. I talked about our neighborhood chipping program already, and we have roughly about 6,500 homeowners participate in that each year. And then wildfire mitigation projects on public lands and plan review and inspections. So this is some of our stats and the results that we've gotten in the last 15 years. Out of the the chipping program, we've had 62,000 homes. Now a lot of those are repeats, obviously, right? But those are the number of individuals that have participated in the chipping program over the last 15 years, which estimates to about 27,000 acres mitigated and almost 12,000 tons of woody material removed from our landscape. We've also been able to implement project work on public lands. And you can see on the right side of your screen, all those little shapes and colored polygons are where we've done mitigation work to the tune of almost 4,000 acres that we've mitigated in our community over the last 15 years. So moving into the Wildfire Resiliency Code, we were fortunate that our code was the basis of a lot of the consideration that the State Wildfire Resiliency Code Board looked at when they were working on their code. And so what that allows us is we were kind of ahead of the game from a lot of other departments. And so much of what was already in our existing WUI already aligns with the Class 2 requirements out of the state code. Our difference that we looked at when we looked at the state code is we wanted to make sure that we upheld where we're more restrictive than the state code, and certainly brought in those provisions in the state code that we did not currently have in our code. And then we wanted to look at our local risk map. We were because we already had a WUI area designated, we wanted to make sure that we kept that intact. And so when we're evaluating the state map versus what our local experiences were, we ran through some modeling and developed what is the green area shown on the map on the page. As you can see, the population of that green area, and that's currently just counting already plotted parcels. That's almost 11,000 parcels out there, but plenty of room to grow. Much of that land's undeveloped. And then the Class 2 areas in the red, we've got over 36,000 parcels within that area, which is almost 25% of our population in Colorado Springs lives in that existing WUI. So we've got a substantial WUI in our area. Now, one of the things that I know most jurisdictions have really struggled with as they begin to look at the WUI, the Wildfire Resiliency Code, is who enforces it? Is that through the planning department? Is that through the building department? Is that through the fire department? And because we already had our WUI code within our fire code, we continued to continue in that direction and implement the Wildfire Resiliency Code changes within our existing fire code. Obviously, we need assistance from planning department, building department to make that happen in that plan routing process and ensuring that those areas were identified in the WUI and plans were routed to us for review. And so, some of the challenges, that I want to speak to are the lessons learned as I kind of wrap up my presentation. Over the years, we've realized that you have to have continuous engagement. The area that was impacted by the Waldo Canyon fire, we did a study 5 years after the fire, and that neighborhood had changed hands. Over 50% of that neighborhood had moved or changed hands for those homes in that first 5 years. And so what we thought was apathy moving forward really was just that we had a transit population within that area. And so we couldn't fire and forget. That messaging had to be consistent. We had to make sure that we engaged the community and really continue to share the same message over and over and over again. Another challenge that we've always really struggled with is the homeowner DIY landscaping. And we really don't have a good process in our local codes on how to regulate that. And I'm sure most of you guys would have that same challenge. A husband and wife go to a home improvement store or nursery on a Saturday, buy a bunch of plants and a couple trees, plant that, and think life is good. And without a regulatory process in place to limit what they can plant, or at least educate them, that's a constant battle to work with those homeowners and make sure they're planting and doing mitigation work that is in alignment with the code. And so we continue to work with that. And our answer is we're really engaged in the homeowner associations and their architectural and landscaping boards to partner with us in helping to enforce that the codes are upheld for those areas. And then lastly, the picture on your screen is a fire that we had just a couple weeks ago. And ironically, you can see the sign there that was in the area of one of our previous wildfire mitigation projects. And so I just want to leave with you with a word of encouragement that mitigation does work. That fire stayed on the ground. It didn't get up in the scrub oak or the ladder fuels, and was actually a really slow moving fire that skunked around that area. Unfortunately, that was a set fire within our WUI in the middle of the night, and our crews got on it pretty quick. But that was a test of the work that we had done, and really a testament to the hard work that the community does as well to help maintain those lands. So I will stop my presentation at this point and look forward to hearing the other presenters and being part of the conversation.
Thank you, Kris. Really appreciate that insight. And I will encourage everyone, if you have questions, we're going to wait until the end of the presentations by our speakers, but you can feel free to drop those in the chat so that we can look back over them. If you just think of something as you're listening to our speakers go through. And I really want to call out something Kris was talking about there with the enforcement component and the maintenance, and how important the education component is of making sure people understand why mitigation matters and getting the buy-in. Because even if we have all the codes in place and enforcement staff out there, it ultimately comes back to the community understanding why this is important and supporting each other. So thank you for calling that out. Okay, with that, we'll go ahead and turn it over to Becca with Fire Adapted Colorado. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I don't think I can get rid of the bar across the top of my screen, so bear with that if you will. Thank you for having me, Aaron and Kim. I appreciate being here. And I'm bringing a little bit of a different perspective. I'm joining you from my home office in Dolores in Montezuma County. And for close to the last 8 years, I've served as the executive director for Fire Adapted Colorado. So I'm not a local practitioner or implementer in the same way as the other folks on the giving presentations today. But my prior roles included local land use planning and community development. And then I became the Montezuma County program coordinator for our local wildfire council in 2011, where I coordinated volunteer neighborhood ambassadors for their wildfire mitigation projects in their neighborhoods, supported post-fire recovery, built county-wide incentive programs, and supported the local subdivision wildfire mitigation regulations that our county had. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about FACO and then some resources that we might have to support your local implementation, and a little snippet of the why as well, or my perspective on the why codes are so important. Fire Adapted Colorado has been working as Colorado's network for wildfire resilience leader since 2015 as the only organization that's wholly dedicated to supporting wildfire resilience professionals. And anybody who's a newly founded Wildfire Resiliency Code implementer, I would count you in that and welcome you into our network. We currently serve about 280 active participants who represent wildfire councils, fire departments, watershed and fire shed collaboratives, and local governments that are working on fire adaptation in their communities. And we also have participants that represent state and federal agencies, research and scientific groups, such as the Community Wildfire Planning Center, and other nonprofit and business partners that support one or more aspect of community wildfire adaptation. And our place-based and the partner network participants actively engage in community and residential mitigation strategies, including the implementation of locally adopted WUI building codes and land use regulations, landscape treatments, post-fire recovery efforts, watershed protection treatments, and more, some of the kinds of programs that Kris was speaking to. So when I think about fire-adapted communities, I think about this whole suite of different activities, and I don't expect you to read the tiny language here, but at about 2 to 3 o'clock in this framework is regulations, policies, and plans that includes wildfire protection plans and spatial fire plans, and all scales of codes and ordinances as one important piece of how we can help communities bounce back quicker or withstand wildfires like another weather event. So this is just a perspective on how many fire adapted communities leaders view community and landscape wildfire resilience. So seeing that as a part of the pie, I think it's a little bit of what Kris was talking about as well, of how this goes hand in hand with so many other aspects of your community fire protection. So a few ways that Fire Adapted Colorado might support local efforts. Big one is just the connection to those local experts. So we have another 5 of them on today, and there's another, 275 who I know around the state, right? So connecting with those local experts for the resources that they can connect you with for those local chipping programs or other incentives that can help get the work done, and also for the technical support to implement codes. Another thing that Fire Adapted Colorado does is we try to help bring training. So had a little bit of conversation with Aaron and Kim about what training is needed. We have some complementary training and a lot of people who have already been through home ignition zone trainings around the state, and we have, we can connect those people with you if you're looking for somebody with that expertise to support the code or to train your building officials in that. And then some other potential system integrations that we can support, such as thinking about our state's wildfire mitigation tax credit that only does things for vegetation treatment. Can we be a voice to help push for that to support some of the Wildfire Resiliency Code structure standards and align those? Being able to be a voice to work with builders associations and suppliers on availability of the resources, the supplies that you need to build wildfire resistant new homes. There's also a lot of different players, and hearing Kris talk about how it was great alignment in Colorado Springs for the fire department to implement as a part of their fire code. When I think about where I live, where we don't even have residential building codes, and I'm a volunteer firefighter for Dolores that does not have the capacity to manage this within the fire district, we need other players and partners to be able to help with implementation of local codes. And it really does take the village to make sure the supplies are there, make sure people are designing well, make sure that we're maintaining those homes properly, and that we have the incentives to help people meet the code, as well as just wildfire resilient practices in general. A few simple mitigation services that local jurisdictions can offer. Chipping services are often a foot in the door program for local communities, as well as other slash drop off or dumpster programs. Voluntary home fire risk assessments, or I think that's what Kris calls them, consultations there. They're called something different in every jurisdiction, but those detailed assessments for the landowners on a voluntary basis. A connection to the local wildfire protection plan so people can see where their actions fit within the overall effort. Lists of forestry contractors and all the way down to homeowners association level planning. And I'm looking forward to hearing what more of the local practitioners here are going to tell us about how they've adopted and are implementing the local resiliency codes. Because every community and structure is a little different, and you all have different assets to accomplish the structure hardening and the landscape requirements of the wildfire resiliency codes. So connection with local partners. This is a network directory that we have available on our map. After I'm done presenting, I'll share links to a couple of these things. This is available on the Fire Adapted Colorado website. And many of our network participants are already key local players for implementing both regulatory and voluntary programs for wildfire resilience. And these are people who many of you are on here, but some of you who don't know who these players are, you might be able to find some other key people who can help with your code to be successful locally. Whether you're a community with limited regulations where it's challenging to even implement the bare minimum, or if you're already employing high standards in the WUI for construction and land use development. I heard a presentation at the Colorado Wildland Fire Conference a couple of weeks ago, a panel that I think Carolyn put that together as the code board administrator. I heard Gunnison County talking about their partnership with West Region Wildfire Council to implement the landscape portion of the vegetation management portion of their local code. And I think Jake, who's going to be up after me, also has similar experience partnering with West Region and Ouray County. So that's a great example of leveraging partners. So if you select a polygon on this map and go to the network directory, you can see an organization within our network and a few details about the kind of work that they do. So this is pulled up from Archuleta County, one of the 5 counties that Wildfire Adapted Partnership works in. And you can see what kind of expertise they might bring to support the technical reports or the voluntary programs that they can bring to help residents overcome their obstacles to accomplishing the code standards or even maintaining those. And if you see like the key services down there, each one of these places, everything that was highlighted on the map, there will be some services that are already available in that area. So hopefully that's a tool, if you haven't explored it before, that you will find helpful. Let's see. In addition to the cross-pollination training that those local mitigation specialists might partner on with you, there's also the assessing structure ignition potential training that we have partnered with State Forest Service to get held around the state for the last several years. And we're hoping to be able to continue that and/or transition to these one-day home ignition zone trainings that we can help schedule in an area to just make sure that the science, there's solid understanding of the science and the reasons behind the things that are in the codes, and that people are going out for those assessments can also recognize, or going out for those code inspections, also recognize the other things that could be done to make that home more fire resistant. Some outreach things to think about. This has come up on all of the code implementation conversations that I've seen. In addition to partnering to find existing resources to support code adoption, compliance, and enforcement, I encourage you to leverage the overlapping values that these these code requirements have. These building code requirements aren't unusual, and like not asking for anything crazy or that's that out of the ordinary for modern construction. And they're also compatible with many other overlapping values. So if you get to understand your client, the builder, the owner, and share the overlapping benefits of the fire resistant design and construction with the other things they may care about, in the way they're sealing things for energy efficiency that's also going to keep the embers out of their homes, the lower long-term maintenance that you get from more fire-resistant building materials, the screening that keeps animals out of places, right? There's a lot of other great reasons and benefits of the fire-resistant standards that we have. And then I'm going to carry this home safety and long-term insurability thought to something we should be communicating with residents, also across to why we want the Wildfire Resiliency Code, right? Both to the residents and our clients that we're working with, we want them to understand that this is ultimately to help you have a more resilient home that's going to be there through disasters, and that we as local communities value our housing as an important part of the infrastructure, and we want you to be able to stay in your house. But there's all of these kind of ancillary economic benefits that come with that, maybe long-term insurability, but to the homeowner, you want their home to not burn down. I'm kind of going backwards here on my list, but bear with me. Disasters affect housing stability, the local tax base, small businesses with downtime, and loss and utility costs. I just saw a presentation to the Fire Commission's insurance subcommittee last week that said a third of the annual local gross domestic product is spent on disaster and weather costs. A third. So that's why even if not every community is great about adopting and enforcing this code right away, you're still going to see this show up as a condition for housing finance. And we have to figure out how to design, supply, and build to these more resilient standards, to climate and disaster resilience standards for a variety of reasons. And last thought here at the top, when one house impacts fire outcomes for their neighbors, that's when we need the Wildfire Resiliency Code. Because we know that embers from one house can catch and ignite another if it's not very fire resistant. And we can also accomplish more this bottom picture where one home burning doesn't have to ignite all of its neighbors. And that has positive ripple impacts on the entire community if we're keeping homes from burning one another down. So that's all I have, and we'll drop a couple of links in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Becca. We appreciate your time.
That was great.
Yeah, really was. I think we in Colorado are all very lucky to have an organization like Fire Adapted Colorado as a resource that can help connect us, build that network, support the community. Those trainings are a fantastic opportunity for anyone that has the ability to attend them. And I think I just want to call back real quick to something that you were saying about the crossover and the benefits that we're seeing with mitigation, hardened homes, and the building materials that are being used. I know a common example recently is the red roofed house in Lahaina that had done mitigation not for fire, but for insects primarily. And they just so happen to take a lot of similar approaches to building design and materials that we recommend for wildfire mitigation. And the benefit that provided to them during that fire was astounding. So just something that we like to pay attention to is, it's not just wildfire we're talking about, but it is home resilience kind of across the board that this can help with.
Great.
We'll go ahead and turn it over to Jake Neese with Ouray County then.
Hello. So I don't have a set of slides for you, but I'm going to talk about what we're seeing at the local government level about implementing this code. Again, I'm a county commissioner in Ouray County. I also worked as a wildland firefighter from 2011 to 2018. So I've had the benefit of seeing what happens when you don't mitigate your homes, when you don't mitigate around your homes and do home hardening. And so I am going to share my screen and show you one thing here. Here in Ouray County, we have fuel types from pinyon and juniper to heavy timber with houses mixed in everywhere. And our entire county just about is WUI. And so we're not gonna, is that sharing there? Yeah. So we're not making a big distinguishment between different areas of the county. We already have a pretty strict wildfire code. Ouray County initially adopted our wildfire code in 1997, but then in 2020 made a really big change to align it with the NFPA home ignition zone best practices. And this, at the time, that was significantly more strict than most folks were used to and most of the rest of the state. But people in our community have accepted that this is a collective action problem. And something that Rebecca touched on is if your neighbor doesn't do the work, that can impact you. And so as we've had more people move into the county, using our wildfire building code is a great way to educate folks and to alert them to the wildfire risk. We've got a lot of summer homes and people who just come for the summer season. And so they miss a lot of messaging about what's going on, and they just want to treat this as a vacation area and not have to worry about serious things like their house burning down. But when they have to confront that in the building code, when they either build a house or do a major renovation, that's a really great place for us to communicate with folks who might not otherwise be paying attention. So our wildfire code was one of the codes that the state looked at when the state was building its code. Unfortunately, our existing code doesn't quite meet the required format of the new state code. And we're also in the process of adopting the low energy carbon code and updating the IBC. And so for us, this is the other side of the unfunded mandate issue that you may sometimes hear about, that you may hear local governments push back on. We have 4 people in our land use, building, and planning department who are doing building inspections, code updates, and all the rest. And so we actually are not going to be able to meet the deadline for implementing the state code, even though we already have a wildfire code that's substantially similar to the state code. So that has been a bit of a struggle at the local government level, is just a lot of requirements on us as a small jurisdiction with a small building department. We think we're going to get to it this fall, but we're just not going to quite make that July 1st deadline. It's not that there's any culture against it. It's just the reality of a lot of requirements coming down from the state onto local governments. Another thing I wanted to mention is the insurance aspect. Well, do more than mention it, talk about it. Here in Ouray County, our residents are having a hard time getting coverage. It's not a hypothetical issue here. It's already happening. It's already real. We had a person who was covered in the local paper, unable to sell their house because the buyers couldn't get insurance. I personally have been warned that if I ever don't make a payment on my home insurance, that State Farm is looking for an excuse to cancel my policy, and that they wouldn't write a new policy today on my house. And so we're living that issue now, and that gets back to the wildfire mitigation as a collective action topic. It doesn't just go for the spread of fire, it goes for insurance coverage, because you type in your zip code and the insurance agent will just give you back a yes or no. I've spent some time with a local agent actually trying to get them to escalate the issue up to State Farm, because he was interested in trying to do more coverage of hard to cover homes, and he wound up running into the same brick wall that the rest of us see. They won't tell us about their algorithm. They just say you're in a wrong zip code and we're not providing coverage. And so that's something that we've got to work together on as a state to push back against insurance companies to recognize that when we do things like pass this statewide wildfire code and implement it, that actually makes us more attractive to provide coverage for. And so I'm really happy that the state went ahead and did this. There's going to be some growing pains with it, but in the end, we'll be better off for it. Finally, on challenges, this also was mentioned before. It's communication. People only hear the message when they're ready to. So I speak the gospel of wildfire mitigation and home hardening almost every day, and people only receive it when they're truly ready. For example, here we had about 20% of parcels in the county change hands during the pandemic from 2020 to 2022. So we've got 1 out of 5 people new here, and a lot of people aren't familiar with the wildfire risk. So it's just, it can be a challenge saying the same message, putting out the same information again and again, but people are largely coming to the table and understanding the risk, and understanding why we're implementing these codes. Another big one is not cutting pinyon pine, which we have a lot of during the Ips beetle reproduction period, which is pretty much all summer. So we have those requirements in our code, and they can't do that work necessarily in the summer, or they shouldn't do that work in the summer. But I have to say that our local partner, West Region Wildfire Council, is a huge help in getting individual homeowners to do mitigation work. They help us do inspections for homeowners to check off their mitigation and home hardening requirements when they're going for their CO. And it's been really effective working with them, since they specialize in that. They help us push out that messaging and connect all our folks with those resources, state and federal, and then the contractors to actually do the work. And so that's a model I definitely recommend trying to replicate statewide, is working with a nonprofit partner that is dedicated to doing that work. So that's all I've got to share. Thanks.
Thank you, Jake. Really appreciate those thoughts. I want to call out, it is a challenge that we recognize for a lot of these jurisdictions, depending on what they have going on in their capacity as they're going through the adoption and the implementation of this code. And I think one of the things we're all coming to the table with is recognizing this is our first time doing something like this, kind of across the board for the whole state. And there's going to be things that trip us up, and there's going to be things that we need to work through. And the best thing I can say is, if you're running into things, either at the jurisdiction level where you're doing the adoption, or if you are, a builder or a manufacturer that's running into issues, that there are resources that are available, and the best thing you can do is communicate. And Jake's done a fantastic job of this with me. We've had a few phone calls, a few meetings where we've talked about where they're at in the process, how things are going along, especially when you're talking about adopting additional codes at the same time. One thing we do always like to point out with this code is that the adoption of this does not drive the adoption of the energy code. Sometimes the timing just lines up for when jurisdictions are doing this, but the Wildfire Resiliency Code does not drive that, if that's something that people have been running into. And with that, Kim, I'll go ahead and let you introduce Paul. Yeah.
So our next speaker, Jake, thank you very much for your presentation. But next speaker will be Paul Cada with Vail Fire Emergency Services. Paul, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, please.
Yeah.
You're all set.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Paul Cada. I'm the Wildland Battalion Chief for Vail Fire. Also happen to be a current board member for Fire Adapted Colorado. Becca's presentation made me laugh because there was a much younger picture of me in that presentation. So just start a little bit about me. So I've been with Vail Fire for coming on 13 years now. My background is in forestry. I am a active operational wildland firefighter, and I oversee the Vail Wildland Fire Program in its totality. Before I jump into a little bit of what our program is, I want to just kind of give a little perspective on what the town of Vail is. So the town of Vail is, as many people have probably driven through, it's a 4.6 square mile stamp of high value property surrounded entirely by the White River National Forest. Our full-time population is about 5,000 people. We have about 5,000 part-time residents, and our daily population can grow by 10 to 20,000 people pretty regularly. Within that 4.6 square miles, we have about $30 billion of assessed property value, and Vail serves as one of the economic centers for Eagle County. We don't necessarily see a lot of large fire in any given year. However, we know the potential exists for catastrophic, unstoppable wildfire. We operate as a community under the motto of wildfire is not if, but when. We've seen over the last 20 years in Eagle County what large wildfires look like. It used to be about every 5 years there'd be a significant wildfire in Eagle County, and we're now getting down to about every 2 years we have a significant wildfire within Eagle County. Our community has many shared values with other mountain communities. Environmental sustainability is largely important to the community. Housing and livability for our workforce is of critical importance. Everybody values the recreational opportunities with the access to the national forest, and we're really heavily focused on maintaining the mountain aesthetic within our community. And so I bring that all up as a point of how do we weave together all of these things with our wildfire programs and the codes that we adopt. So our wildfire program is structured around the tenets of the National Cohesive Wildland Fire Management Strategy, which is around having fire resilient landscapes that are ready to receive fire, having fire adapted communities, and then having safe and effective wildland fire response. And as part of the municipal fire department, a large part of our staffing is focused around the response side of things. However, we put a substantial focus into both creating resilient landscapes. We have a fairly large and active program managing the landscapes, working collaboratively with the White River National Forest and our partners on Vail Mountain to ensure that our landscapes that surround the community are ready for wildfire. A large part of my staffing time, while all of my folks are operational wildland firefighters, most of what they do is actually working within the space of creating fire adapted communities. We really take a multi-pronged approach to ensuring that our community is ready for fire. And we work through a variety of different tools. Education is our starting place, our middle place, and our end place. We have a very active curbside wildfire hazard assessment program. We do curbside wildfire hazard assessments for approximately 20% of our community every year. That totals about 1,000 curbside wildfire hazard assessments. We share that information with each individual property owner. As was shared with other communities, we have high turnover within our community. Sometimes I feel like a broken record with the messaging that we put out. However, I recognize that just because I've said this message 1,000 times doesn't mean that the person I'm talking to has heard it once. And so, we make sure that we have a core set of messages that are critical. We also focus on getting that information broadly out to the community. Many of our folks are part-time residents, and so we send that information to them. We don't wait for them to come and ask for it. We also focus heavily on evacuation preparedness within our community. I-70 is our transportation corridor through our area. It is a blessing and a curse. Anybody that's ever tried to commute from the Front Range to any ski area recognizes what I-70 really can be. Without a doubt, in wildfire, it is our only means of ingress and egress into our community, and it is dangerously fragile, in my opinion. So early evacuation is a critical component to our public safety. We have a incentive program to ensure that our community members have access to financial resources to assist in doing critical mitigations such as our Fire Free 5 Community Assistance Program, which is an individual parcel level incentive program to help people implement 5 feet of non-combustible landscaping around every structure. And then we also work towards enforcement. So in 2018, the town adopted our first WUI code. In 2018, that's when the adoption actually happened. The conversations really actually started back in 2015. We started with model codes such as the iWUI code. And after many conversations with the stakeholders within our community, we pivoted to following the model of what the state of California has adopted with their Chapter 7A Wildfire Code. So our adopted code from 2018 is modeled after the Chapter 7A requirements. It applies equally to every property within the community, and it applies to things such as roofs, walls, landscaping, really all components of that. Since 2018, every adoption cycle that we've gone through, we've continued to close the net. So we started in 2018 with new construction and substantial additions, similar to what the state code is. And we've closed the net down to the point now where if a property is to do any version of exterior remodel, that part of the component shall comply with whatever the current version of the code is. As was mentioned by others, the question is who owns and enforces this code? And we have a really great collaborative partnership with our community development department. And so we as the fire department do the plan review for all of this. Our building officials are the code official for enforcement of the building components, and our planning staff is who enforces the planning codes. The way that it works is that they are inspecting an as-built, and if what they see in their inspections does not match the reviewed and approved plans, then the fire department gets involved in terms of determining how do we work through that. It's been a great partnership. It's brought us all together much closer as departments. And, it's definitely something I would share and consider in other places in the state. The last thing that I kind of wanted to hit on, so to reference, how are we approaching the state code requirements? So the town of Vail applied for and received actually the first petition for adoption of the existing code. So the town of Vail is not adopting the state code. We've petitioned to continue to use our existing code, and that's the direction that we are going to continue to go. It is in substantial alignment with the requirements of the Class 2 requirements of the state code. Of particular significance, I think, in all of this is beyond just the municipal boundaries of the town of Vail. Over the last 2 years, all of the jurisdictional agencies within Eagle County have been working together to align our WUI codes. It has been a fairly large lift, but one of the things that came up in our development of our community wildfire protection plan was that code requirements across Eagle County varied wildly. We have lots of places where 2 jurisdictions abut, and the requirements were vastly different. Here in West Vail, we have a portion of unincorporated Eagle County that touches buildings within the town of Vail. Both jurisdictions had WUI codes that had significantly different requirements. Our community let us know about that. And so for the last 2 years, we've been working together to align those codes, and I'm really excited to share that of the 7 jurisdictions along the I-70 portion of Eagle County, 6 of them will have essentially identical codes. So our builders, our communities, and the protection are aligned across jurisdictional boundaries. So particularly proud of that achievement. It was a huge collaborative lift, and something that I would encourage everybody to consider is, what are your neighbors doing? So that's really what I had on my list.
Paul, we really appreciate that. Those are some pretty impressive numbers that you were discussing for your curbside. Your crews are pretty busy, but actually the collaborative aspect that with working with your building department, I think being proactive like that is so smart, having that working relationship. So we really appreciate your time today. And letting everybody know how it's working for you. So thank you for being here. Our next speaker will be Phillip Sweat from town of Breckenridge, Deputy Building Official. Phillip?
Hey, thanks, Kim. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. Greetings from snowy Breckenridge. Happy Building Safety and Wildfire Awareness Month. I hope everybody got their fair share of snow from this last storm cycle. I know we are ready for rain here. Even though we haven't had a huge winter, it's still, yeah, anyway, it goes on and on here sometimes, the high elevation. Anyway, to circle back, my name's Phillip Sweat. I'm the Deputy Building Official with the town of Breckenridge. Some background on myself. I've been with the town for about 4.5 years now. Before moving to Colorado, or before moving back to Colorado, my wife and I lived in outside of Albuquerque, New Mexico, up in the mountains down there. And I was an inspector in that area for the county, which had a lot of wildland urban interface. It had areas along the Rio Grande River, which was bosky, and areas to the east of the city, and then areas on the east side of the mountains. So we are really familiar with the WUI, and just like everybody else that's on this meeting today, we're all right in the smack dab middle of it. As Paul was just saying, they're surrounded on all sides by the White River. We are as well here in Breckenridge. So yeah, we are looking for more rain. We usually see fairly brief fire season in the spring, and then again in the fall, when the snow finally melts out, it dries out a little bit before we get the summer rains. But this year is unprecedented, as everyone knows. It's a statewide problem. So I'm going to share my screen here, see if we can get the right screen. I think it is this one. Okay. Can you see my screen? Perfect.
No, we're not seeing it yet, Phillip.
Not seeing it.
No.
Let's see. I'm working through it. How's that?
There we go. You're all set.
You got it now?
Yep.
Okay, great. Cool. All right. Well, today I'll be covering the town of Breckenridge's code adoption of the 2025 Colorado Wildfire Resiliency Code, our development process, outreach and education, code adoption, mapping, implementation, resources and challenges, ongoing outreach and education, past and future projects that align with the CWRC, Colorado Wildfire Resiliency Code. And just to circle back real quick, in recognition of Building Safety Month, on Tuesday, April 28th, our town council officially proclaimed that May is Building Safety and Wildfire Awareness Month. I had the honor of recognizing our council during the regular session for their support during our code adoption process. As part of the code development process here in BRAC, we adopt the International Code Council I-codes every 6 years. Last year, we adopted the 2024 I-codes along with specific amendments to address our climate zone, sustainability initiatives for outdoor energy use, a new fire code addressing fire sprinkler requirements in residential construction, above code amendments to the 24 IECC, or the International Energy Conservation Code, and the 2025 Colorado Wildfire Resiliency Code. During our code adoption process last year, we received a grant from the Colorado Energy Office to facilitate adoption of the 2024 International Energy Conservation Code. Some of the grant monies were utilized to bring in a code consultant. Big shout out here to Shauna Mazingo for all of her help. Shauna is an amazing resource, and if you hadn't had the chance to work with her, I highly recommend it. Catch up with her at one of her many conferences or trainings she hosts or attends. The rest of the grant monies went towards funding for local contractors and design professionals to attain tools, certifications, and trainings. In addition, we hosted 6 outreach and educational roundtables where we invited our stakeholders, contractors, design professionals, and the community. All told, we had roughly 150 members of the public attend and participate. I bring this up because besides the energy code adoption, we also piggybacked along the messaging for the Wildfire Resiliency Code that was coming. We also had the honor to host Chief Kris Burnett from the Colorado Division of Fire Prevention and Control last October to present a specific 4-hour wildfire code training for us. We had about 50 folks turn out for that. Big shout out here to Kris. He was logging a lot of miles at that time, and we really appreciate it. Thanks, Kris. We also attended our local Summit County Builders Association annual meeting, along with representatives from our local fire protection district, Red, White, and Blue, as well as our neighboring jurisdictions, Summit County Building Department, Frisco's Planning and Building Departments, and Summit County Fire and EMS. The annual meeting, I like to call it the Code Officials Roast, is where we get grilled, pun intended, about our code adoptions. And the CWRC was definitely right there at the top of the list. During our code adoption process, we had full support from our town council and town manager's office to adopt the CWRC with a few tweaks for our historic district. You can see some of them here on the slide. We wanted to leave the determination for structure hardening, defensible space, and other mitigation measures to be determined by our planning division. We wanted flexibility within our town core and historic district to be able to maintain the character of historic and contributing structures, while also meeting the spirit and intent of the CWRC. As for mapping, we worked together with our local fire district, Red, White, and Blue. Shout out here to Chief Executive Officer and Fire Marshal Jay Nelson, who's on this meeting, by the way. He was instrumental and invaluable with our code adoption process. Working together, we determined that all areas within the town of Breckenridge's legal boundaries were not identified on the state map as high fire intensity, would be designated moderate fire intensity. Additionally, we are entering into an MOU with Red, White, and Blue to collaborate and provide enforcement on site and area requirements. So now moving into implementation, resources and challenges. To start with, implementation and resources. We created these permit submittals you're seeing here, these checklists that help guide our design professionals and contractors to specific requirements we need for planning and building plan reviews, including our contributing partners at Red, White, and Blue as they review the site and area requirements. We're also working on adding additional inspections to our permit flows. Some of these will be required while others will be optional, depending on permit types. These will include specific exterior wall inspections, structure hardening, continuous insulation that is compliant with structure hardening, decking, material specifications, and roofing Class A assemblies. We created some helpful handouts that we attach to each roofing permit. We also determined some areas of, potential areas of conflict. I had a meeting with I like to call her a code geek last night about this, and we're still working through it. So stay tuned. But we're identifying that to meet the energy code requirements up here when they are looking for continuous insulation, we don't want to see the foam, melt away and leave a void, but we're still working through that. So stay tuned. Reach out if you have any questions. I'll leave my information at the end here. As I mentioned earlier, we have ongoing outreach and education as we continue to learn and implement new processes. And as the industry and our design professionals and contractors present new compliant materials and assemblies. We're all learning. I think new technologies will catch up. And as you can see on the slide here, we recently had a roundtable meeting with our local jurisdictions here in Summit County to review implementation of the CWRC in an effort really to align our jurisdictions. We really feel it's important to have consistency with the code and interpretations of the code to better serve our local communities. Very similar to what Paul was just saying, working together with your neighbors. Here's a few photos of some past projects. I like to call these almost code compliant. You can see the grass is right up next to the houses, but we've already banned wood shakes and shingles here. We've already established a lot of fire mitigation site and area requirements here. So we are well on our way to meeting the code with just a few little touches here and there. And here's a rendering of a future project we have. This is 148 proposed workforce units that are coming. Phase 1 is 81 units. It's a mix of single family homes, duplexes, and townhomes. It's just broken ground and the permits are issued. And that's all the slides I have for you guys today. Here is my contact info if anybody wants to reach out. I'll also drop that into the slide. If I can stop sharing my screen now.
Phillip, we really appreciate this. It's been a pleasure working with you. For everybody on the chat or on the program today, what Phillip did mention is he actually sits as a member of the Wildfire Resiliency Code Board. He's a new member on it, but he's done a great job. I think it's a great thing that he's part of this. So we really do appreciate that. It's been fun working with you so far. Our last speaker, least, I guess not in the least, Mr. Jay Nelson, Chief Jay Nelson. He's Chief Executive Officer, he's Fire Marshal, as he mentioned, he's acting as the Fire Marshal for the county now. He's actually covering interim for Summit Fire and EMS. So, Chief Nelson, please go ahead.
Good afternoon, and thank you for this opportunity. I'm going to talk to you about the wildfire efforts across Summit County, what we've accomplished, the challenges we continue to face, and how the Colorado Wildfire Resiliency Code fits into the future of our community. In Summit County, wildfire mitigation is not new to us. In the county's unincorporated areas, defensible space and Class A roofing requirements date back to the late 1980s. At the time, Summit County, along with the local fire districts, I think there were 7 of them, and the Colorado State Forest Service recognized that living in a high elevation forested environment required a different approach to development and community safety. Those efforts focused on residential structures only. Over the years, we've continued to evolve those efforts as our communities have grown and as wildfire occurrences have increased. In our towns, however, we've had a different history, different development patterns, and different regulatory approaches that has created challenges in establishing consistency across all of our jurisdictions. Mainly those challenges have been with the development codes or the planning codes. Since the early 2000s, we've been collaborating with the town of Breckenridge to implement defensible space planning and wildfire mitigation strategies to fit the community's character while still addressing wildfire risk. At the time we went before council and there was work to be done on defensible space ordinance being in the town, part of the town ordinances. That failed. There was a lot of community pushback, and what came out of that was a voluntary defensible space program that took shape and really, I think, helped prepare us for the Colorado Wildfire Resiliency Code adoption in the town, and really started the process of changing the planning codes, removing some of the planting requirements at that time. Our community mitigation work has taken years of partnerships, education, and collaboration between the fire agencies, the planning departments, our building officials, elected leaders, our HOAs, the building contractors, our residents, and ultimately the loud voices in the community. That's what our challenges have been, is the loud voices. And that really reflects the broader story of wildfire mitigation in Summit County. Success happens when the jurisdictions work together, like Phillip had talked about. And thank you, Phillip, for the work that we were able to do collaboratively with the code adoption. Today, wildfire in our community includes a wide range of efforts. It's defensible space and education, fuels reduction projects. In this past winter, we were able to remove approximately 7,000 piles of fuel by burning them in collaboration with the U.S. Forest Service and the town and county open space departments. Public outreach and firewise efforts, meeting with our water purveyors and having discussions, and the Wildland Urban Interface Planning and grants through the Summit County Wildfire Council. We've had significant success through this. We've seen strong community engagement through our Firewise USA program, with approximately 13 recognized Firewise communities within the Breckenridge or within the Red, White, and Blue Fire Protection District, and additional neighborhoods working toward recognition. That's important because Firewise is not just a designation, it represents the neighborhoods taking ownership of wildfire preparedness at the local level. These communities are organizing mitigation projects, educating residents, improving defensible space, and building stronger partnerships with local governments. What we found is that when residents become directly involved in wildfire mitigation efforts, the entire community becomes more resilient. Our wildfire division estimates that 1 hour of mitigation education equates to approximately 20 hours of mitigation work in the community. Firewise communities help create a culture of preparedness, and they encourage neighbors to work together, share resources, and understanding that wildfire mitigation is an ongoing responsibility, not just a one-time project or government requirement. The growth of Firewise participation in Summit County is a strong indicator that our residents understand the reality of living in a wildfire-prone environment and are willing to be part of the solution. But despite that progress, we still face major challenges. One of the biggest challenges is consistency. While wildfire doesn't stop at jurisdictional boundaries, that's one of the reasons that the Colorado Wildfire Resiliency Code is very important for the state. The Colorado Wildfire Resiliency Code gives us the framework to help us align wildfire mitigation efforts while still allowing local jurisdictions to adapt requirements to local conditions. And local conditions matter in Summit County. We have environmental factors, topography, fuel type, weather patterns, including increased wind events, snowfall, sometimes, changes in development density, and water supply challenges. A one-size-fits-all approach doesn't always work here. That's why our agencies have been collaborating to align inspection practices. This collaboration is about creating that consistency, the clarity, and practical implementation of the Colorado Wildfire Resiliency Code across all communities in Summit County. Our goals are straightforward: ensure consistent inspection and enforcement practices, clarify how the code applies locally, reflect local wildfire risks and environmental conditions, and improve alignment between jurisdictions. This helps reduce the confusion for homeowners, contractors, and inspectors. Our focus is on defensible space and vegetation management at the fire district level, and we recognize that the building officials are the experts in structural hardening. And so, as Phillip had talked about, we're aligning MOUs to create the lanes of what jurisdiction is responsible for what aspects of the Colorado Wildfire Resiliency Code. Another challenge we face is balancing wildfire mitigation with community expectations and environmental concerns. We know people move to Summit County because they love the trees, the forested neighborhoods, and the community's mountain character. But those same characteristics is what creates our risk. So our work often involves difficult conversations about tree removal, vegetation management, aesthetics, environmental stewardship, and property rights. And education continues to be critical. We have to help people understand that wildfire mitigation is not about removing every tree. It's about reducing fuel continuity, improving survivability, and creating conditions where our firefighters can safely and effectively defend structures. Another challenge is implementation capacity. Wildfire mitigation takes time, funding, staffing, contractor availability, and long-term maintenance. Defensible space is not a one-time project. It requires ongoing upkeep and community commitment, and that also involves education on that upkeep. And of course, the drought conditions and changing fire behavior continue to increase the urgency of this work. Longer fire seasons, drier fuels, and more extreme fire behavior are forcing all of us to rethink how communities are built and maintained in fire-prone areas. But despite these challenges, I believe Summit County is well positioned moving forward. As I've talked about, we already have a strong foundation. We have decades of wildfire mitigation experience. We have collaborative relationships between agencies and our contractors, and we have growing public awareness. We have engaged FireWise communities, and we have had an opportunity to align our efforts even further with the adoption of the new code. Our goal moving forward is not simply code compliance. Our goal is community resilience. That means creating communities that are better prepared to survive wildfire, recover from wildfire, and reduce the risk to residents, responders, infrastructure, and the environment. It also means continuing to work together across all jurisdictions, county government, towns, fire districts, the building departments, our utility providers, HOAs, and the public. Ultimately, wildfire resiliency is not owned by any one agency. It's a shared responsibility. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to present today and look forward to continuing this work together.
Jay, I really appreciate your time. Thank you for everything. Those are actually some pretty interesting stats that you were provided. We'll be talking more on those. So, we'd like to open up now. Does anybody else have any questions? We've had a couple in the chat. Sean, I'm going to be getting back to you on yours. I'm going to email you some information. So, but does anybody else have any questions? We're going to open it up to the general public. But I'd just like to say thank you to all of our speakers. This has been a great presentation, and can't thank you enough. So,
yeah, just feel free to raise your hand if you have a question you'd like to ask. And I'd like to reiterate just thank you to our speakers. It's been great to hear from all of you. And while people kind of mull over some questions, I just want to say it's been really interesting to see the different approaches and how everyone's been undertaking work that in a lot of ways goes above and beyond what the code addresses. The code is kind of setting minimum standards for building and site and area, but we're seeing so many community programs that go past that. We're hearing about chipping programs, landscape level programs, education programs that have been going on. It's really fascinating to see how the code is a tool in the toolbox that helps support everything that's going on. Dave, you raised your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity. Very informative. I'm an exterior renovation contractor, so that means a lot to our business to be in compliance, or at least to be aware of the codes. Jake brought the subject up, insurance. What, if any, part, well, there is a part, obviously, that you expect the insurance companies to take in this, and what can property owners and contractors expect, in your opinion?
It's a great question. The insurance topic is definitely a hard one when it comes to wildfire. House Bill 1182 was passed last year. That is hopefully designed to help us understand how insurance modelers are assessing risk and making sure that those models are, fairly accurate for the actual risk that we're seeing, and as well as opening up a pathway forward for homeowners to understand why they're being rated the way that they are, and hopefully give them an idea of how they might be able to address concerns from the insurance companies, and hopefully basically create a line of communication between insurance and homeowners. And then the code will hopefully help support maintaining insurance representation in the state, as we've been running into more and more large scale issues. We've been seeing insurance companies pull out of areas entirely, write off entire zip codes. And we're really hopeful that the adoption of this code will allow insurance companies to feel confident that they can step back into areas and issue policies, especially with new construction or, properties that do meet the standards of the code. And Becca, I know you've got some great answers on this if you'd like to jump in.
I was gonna throw myself in to be dangerous on insurance for a second here. I do want to point out that insurance was not explicitly part of the legislation that created the Wildfire Resiliency Code Board, even if it came up in nearly every conversation, and the group had to continue to be reminded that we're not putting this code out there in anticipation that adopting code equals insurance availability or discounts in your area, right? There's this back of the mind. We hope it's a piece of the puzzle to say that all new homes in the state will be built to at least this minimum standard, but insurability comes down to understanding of risk in each zip code in each area by each company. And it's been a pretty sloppy understanding of risk up to this point when it comes to understanding of wildfire risk. Our state's doing a ton trying to go through right now and bring down, trying to address hail damages to bring down the cost of insurance in our state, because those get spread out and are actually a significantly larger portion of the insurance costs in our state that often goes unrecognized when people are seeing their insurance change or threaten to get dropped because of their wildfire risk. A couple things that I would point you to, Dave, that I think are some really important tools moving forward. I heard Jake mention it in Ouray how, there's just the whole zip code getting dropped. My brother just moved into a zip like that in Arizona, and he happened to move into one of those Firewise USA recognized communities. And because of that, kind of regardless of some of the other factors, they were willing to write him, at least USAA was willing to write him in that community. So that program is one that still has recognition. And other programs that have recognition for a whole suite of mitigation actions are what you should be looking to. So as a builder, I would definitely recommend checking out Wildfire Prepared Home, Wildfire Prepared with the Insurance Institute of Business and Home Safety, that has a checklist of standards that you could if you're building to those, you're setting up that structure for success and being able to be certified as meeting wildfire prepared home or home plus standard. And that is a really close specific engagement between the insurance companies and a standard that we expect will be recognized in Colorado very soon.
Thank you, Becca. And Jake, would you like to jump in?
Rebecca covered most of what I wanted to say. I think she did a good job with that. I would just, Dave, caution you to temper your expectations, because a lot of this work is being done in the hope that insurance companies will recognize that when you do wildfire mitigation and home hardening, you know that the house has a significantly reduced chance of burning down, but they just don't seem to be recognizing that. They've got a black box that they're just not willing to make changes to. And so this resiliency code is one of the several things that the state is trying to do to make the argument that the insurance companies should change their algorithms and recognize when people do this work. And so, the wildfire ready home checklist that Rebecca mentioned is a good thing to go to. And that, if you have a house that meets that, then an individual or yourself can go and argue with your insurance agent. And really, honestly, right now, that's the best chance you have to make a case if you're struggling to find insurance, is explaining all of the good things that you've done on home hardening and using those standards that are out there. But I would be cautious about having expectations. This is an uphill battle.
Go ahead, Phillip.
Yeah, I'm going to take my town of Breck hat off here and put on my personal hat to answer this question. But I just went through a cementitious siding replacement on my home, Dave, and it was probably the better part of $50,000 for the home and the detached garage. We also did a Class A roof. So I really like to say that I can walk the walk as far as the resiliency code goes. And my insurance carrier, I'm not going to name names, I reached out to them to let them know the project was complete. And my annual reduction in my policy is $10. So my suggestion is whoever client you're working with, as Jake mentioned, reach out to your insurance provider or have your clients reach out and see if there's any reductions. We're hoping, like Rebecca said, down the road, and I think Jake alluded to this too, that the resiliency code will be a driver to help this reduction in the state. But in the meantime, just be prepared for that. I'm not sure it's gonna get them a huge reduction. I would say that as Jake was mentioning, we've seen insurance spike here in the town of Breckenridge for HOAs and large properties in the 300 to 500% increase within the last year. So I was actually happy when I got a $10 reduction and they didn't drop me. So that was all for me. Thanks.
Thank you.
That was great to point out. We have a question from Jeff. Has there been any kickback on the code from historical societies? A lot of them have strict rules about going back with wood siding.
Phillip, is that from the code officials side? Is that something you'd like to comment on?
Yeah, I can comment on that. There are performance paths and prescriptive paths in the code to get to that. with different types of materials. There's, we don't have a building official on from Vail, but as Paul alluded to earlier, those communities along the I-70 corridor have petitioned the code board to use the state fire marshal's justification for 7A. There are some provisions in there, and that's where I would lead you to start looking to get to using exterior wood siding. There's some different assemblies to get you a 1 hour rated wall. We've also met locally with Fire Marshal Chief Nelson here and his team and the team from Summit Fire, EMS, looking at assemblies, how they're put together when you have the structure ignition zone. A lot of the Wildland firefighters that were at the meeting, the Wildland firefighter chief, Jake, can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not sure what Matt Benedict's actual title is, so I apologize. But Chief Benedict, anyway, he indicated that, once you have all these structure ignition zones in place, and you have your vent enclosures covered and your roofing and your decking, and you've done all these other mitigation aspects, that really your ember intrusion and these other jurisdictions along the I-70 corridor using the state fire marshal's justification are really well protected. So we're still looking into that. So more to come on that, but there are assemblies out there that use wood. So if that answers your question.
And I'll just jump in real quick and say that, there is that allowance in the code for historical structures. So as much as we can accommodate those buildings where it makes sense and it aligns with the code, hopefully we can still preserve those in line with it. Becca, go ahead.
Yeah, I thought that was in there, as well as some provisions around kind of treated wood products within the code. So I know that was considered. But the other thing that I was going to share is that for a couple of years now, we've actually had rules in the common, always get the name of this right, wrong, COIA, the Common Interest Owners Association Act. They made some additions to that just a couple of years ago, that an HOA can't prohibit the installation of fire-hardened building materials on a unit owner's property. So that was already kind of being put in. I'm not sure how that might fit or conflict with some of the, if you actually have a historic structure, but that got added into HOA rules because of so many of those old long-standing ones that say you must use wood for this or that. That doesn't matter anymore. That got thrown out a couple of years ago, even before this code, that they can't prohibit you from using fire-resistant building materials. And I'll drop a little blurb where that comes from in the legislation in the chat in a second.
Great, thank you, Becca. Moving on, we've got another question from Dave, and he asks, do any of you expect monetary incentives coming for structural hardening of Colorado properties? So federal, state, local funding, and Becky, you might want to jump back on with that one, but we'll open it up to all of our speakers.
I can jump in from my view on that. I don't expect anything, particularly from the federal government, nor likely, anything from the state government. To me, this is back to the insurability question. We're really in a space of, can we maintain insurability in our communities? That's really the first and most fundamental question. The statement about premium increases of 300, 400, 500%. We're seeing that here in our community as well, and that has some pretty astounding ripple effects through the real estate markets, through workforce housing, through a lot of the other community values that we have, and so a building code is one thing that helps send strong signals to the insurance industry that we are making an effort to make a practical difference. One of the challenges that many of our communities all share is that the codes as are written only impact new construction, substantial additions. We have legacy building stock that is in various forms of bad, very bad, and extremely bad that we really need to address. And particularly when you look at, high density development similar to my community, I have urban and suburban densities in the middle of a high severity area. We are essentially built out as a community. And so we're looking at how do we impact retroactively the existing housing stock that we have. And that's what's truly going to make a difference when it comes to insurability. And, unfortunately, that doesn't come at this point with significant support.
Appreciate that, Paul. That's good. So, Rebecca.
Yeah, I'd love to jump in and take the bait on that one too. Completely echo what Paul is saying. I will also say some local communities have done a great job of trying to create some local incentives for kind of some of the more affordable structure ignition reduction things, and oftentimes more on the retrofit basis. I think Paul even mentioned part of that being their Fire Free 5. I think I heard that in some of the grant opportunities in Colorado Springs as well, and I know quite a few other communities that have decided to develop that out of local funding mechanisms because of a lack of state and federal resources. Our state legislature just repealed the Wildfire Resilient Home Grant, which had been given to DFPC a couple of years ago to pilot and kind of assign them that goal of trying a structure hardening program, which did pretty well for its first year and first round of it, but just kind of got stuck without authorization to spend the rest of that money. And then I think legislature saw a little money in account and decided to take that back this year. And it was a very drop in the bucket, like $100,000 across the whole state to start with. So it was fairly meaningless, other than it assigned DFPC kind of that role of potentially administering wildfire, wildfire resilient, the home hardening piece of this work. That just got repealed, unfortunately. There's something in the works to create resilient roofing systems in Colorado, again, mostly to do with the hail risk in our state, but there's an awful lot of overlapping hail and wildfire risk, and the opportunity to potentially, with that grant program that would come from insurance fees, or part of the premium on insurance and the existing rates, to think about that piece for people who need to upgrade roofs, if it's a part of, I guess in this case with the code, if it's a part of needing to like somebody replacing a roof that meets the threshold for needing to meet the new code, this resilient roofing system funding could potentially be something that would be available to support that, which is of course the most expensive cost if somebody's at that stage of needing to meet the code. And then a couple other things that are in the works, or just thoughts, is had a conversation the other day about our state grant programs and revisiting the vegetation management grants, allowing structure hardening as match requirement. That used 10 years ago, that was in place in our state, and people were able to be pretty flexible with their match, and then some state rules got changed. So I was just talking about that with one of the state Forest Service grant administrators the other day to maybe bring that back. And then I'd really like to revisit, and if you talk to your legislators and they're looking for good ideas for next year, upgrading our state tax incentive program, the wildfire mitigation tax credit, to not only support vegetation removal, but there's no reason why we shouldn't be also letting people write off those structure hardening actions that they're taking. So no great news, but some ideas.
Actually, no, that is great. Another question we had from Sean George: what are the new requirements when replacing James Hardy siding, vinyl siding in each zone? Phillip, you want to? I keep leading you because you're my one building official that I know.
Well, I can't really speak to other jurisdictions, Kim,
Yeah.
but
And that's gonna come down to, it's gonna come down to the local jurisdiction of what the requirements are. And that's how the code was written, to give that, the HJ that authority. Just overall, though, a thought process with either hat on.
yeah, I got the right hat on. From the town's perspective, town of Breckenridge, we have actually added that to our permit workflow now. We did not used to regulate siding replacement, but now with the new resiliency code, we are. So it's really a pretty simple process with us. You know, we try to do everything to incentivize structure hardening. So from decking to, sorry, got a customer out there ringing the doorbell. Yeah, from decking to roofing and siding. So really the requirements are pretty simple with us. It's just the specifications when they're submitted and they get approved, and we do a what we call like a frame wall inspection, so we can inspect the water resistant barrier, make sure that it's all tight. At that time, we look at the venting. Also on our permits, as you saw some of the checklists on my slideshow, we are requiring a site, an area landscape plan, and using red, white, and blue, our fire protection district, to do the review on that. So there's sort of a two-piece there. Each jurisdiction is going to be different, but when we have a surface that's interfacing with these site and area requirements, that's where we're going to partner with the fire district. So that's going to change in different jurisdictions and how they handle that. But we feel like it's a good time to be able to look at both the site and area requirements and the wall. So hope that helps.
Oh, that does, and we appreciate it. And Sean actually had another question on that, just a little different. What will the restrictions be for vinyl replacement windows? And once again, it comes down to the local AHJ of where you're working at, Sean, of how that's gonna be handled. But right now, there's nothing, you know, as long as you're meeting the requirements, how would Breck handle that? The reason, does that?
Yeah, so it's kind of in Breck, we're with the energy code that we're on, the U factor we require for windows, all of our windows now meet the code. As far as multi-pane glass, if you will. So we feel comfortable with that. There's been a lot of talk at the code board about how the windows are sealed with a non-combustible trim. So I think if it's from the same gentleman that has the Hardy question, that they would be doing a non-combustible trim around the window, and then obviously you're sealing for all the air gaps. So I think you'd be good to go.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And then we just have another question. Are there gonna be any penalties outside of potential loss of coverage for homeowners who don't update their homes to match WUI requirements that once they become enforced on July 1st? Actually, no, remember, within the Wildfire Resiliency Code itself, this is applying to new structures that are built after a jurisdiction, after a governing body adopts this code. And then if there's modifications greater than 25% to either roof or the siding, that would drive those requirements, or an addition of greater than 500 square feet onto a structure. So for existing homes, there are no, I don't see any potential loss right now. Yes, would we encourage all homeowners to update? That would be a great thing. I think, but at least get the minimum done with the venting, the gutters. Make sure you have that Class A roof and doing that 0 to 5 foot. That's the greatest benefit for any structure, which is going to help with any structural and vegetation hardening. But right now, there are no penalties if you are not making any modifications to your structure. There's nothing retroactive in the code. So,
And I'll jump in that July 1st deadline is for local governments to adopt. That's a requirement from the state to the local governments. So that won't cover or hit homeowners or builders.
yeah. Really appreciate that, Jake. That does help. And then there was a second part. If a contractor replaced the roof, would that mean the siding has to be replaced too? Siding up here or other flammable, but no, if you're just doing your roof and you're over 25%, it technically would have to be brought up once again, jurisdiction has to have adopted that, the CWRC on those issues, but if it's greater than 25%. And once again, that falls under the regulations of the local authority having jurisdiction.
Yeah, that's one we get a lot, is the major alteration to the exterior, and for the most part, it applies specifically to the part that's being modified. There is a provision in there that if the siding is being done, then there is a requirement for 5 feet of hardened area to be established, like Paul was talking about with the Fire-Free 5. So that is the trigger, but it is specific to the item that's being modified. And Jake, did you have your hand raised on that one too?
No.
Oh, okay.
I threw my hand up.
Yeah.
You know, again, that's a jurisdiction specific. You know, there's general guidance from the state code, but you know, ensuring whatever the adoption of the local jurisdiction, because you know, the code is the floor, if you will. There are certainly jurisdictions that are going above and beyond what that is. So ensuring that you're checking with the local jurisdiction is important.
Yeah, and that was the ultimate thought process from the code board, was that they wanted to give that authority to those local jurisdictions. Because this is a Colorado code. It covers all aspects from east to west, north to south within the state. So we're covering a lot of different areas, from plains to the mountains, western slope, all these different aspects. So the code board itself wanted to make sure that they covered those aspects of the code, but by giving that authority to the local jurisdictions was their primary control or aspect, I guess.
Yeah, well, ultimately, one of the goals with this code was to make sure it could meet communities where they were at, to set a minimum standard, but offer that maximum flexibility where available. And so if people want to go stricter, by all means, they're allowed to do that. And, where possible, if you can have a regional gathering of, what the code's going to be like. Paul was talking about that they've established, great, but we've had some jurisdictions that want to have it be hyper local to them and what they're doing, because it's what works best for their community.
So does anybody else have any other questions? I think we've answered the ones that were in the chat. Not seeing. Final chances. We just really want to appreciate, thank you to everybody that has participated today, our speakers, to all the participants who attended. And this will be posted. Where are we posting it?
We will let everyone know where it's going to be posted. We'll do a follow-up email for everyone who registered, just letting them know where this recording can be found.
Yeah. So, but no, just like I said, this is a great turnout. It was better than what we hoped for. And like I said, we just really like to thank everybody for being here.
Yeah, we are a network. We're a community.
Yeah.
We're all working on this together. And the further I get into my career, I continue to be surprised at the areas that this touches on and the organizations that are working on wildfire in some capacity. So continue breaking down those barriers, continue having those conversations, continue asking the questions. Thank you all for joining us today.
Becca, thank you for posting all that information on the chat. That was great. So very helpful. So, well, on that note, I think we're gonna call it, and thank you to everybody again, and everybody have a great day.
Happy Building Safety Month.
Happy Building Safety Month. Thank you, everyone.
I'm